picture yourself standing on a windswept hill in the year 1270, gazing up at a half-built castle rising from the earth like a giant carved from stone. Its towers are still skeletal, its walls jagged and unfinished, but even in this raw state, it's breathtaking. These medieval fortresses, think Carnarvon or Harlech in Wales, feel eternal, don't they? They're the stuff of legends, conjuring images of knights clashing swords, kings holding court in grand halls, and epic sieges under moonlit skies. Welcome to Boring History, where we strip away the romance and dive into the gritty, often shocking truth behind the past. Today, we're exploring the brutal nightmare of building a medieval castle. A story not of magic or miracles, but of sweat, blood, and sheer human will. These stone giants didn't just appear. They were crafted by thousands of people with nothing but primitive tools and unbreakable determination. What did it really take to raise these fortresses? Could we, with all our modern tech, match their feat if we were stripped of our cranes and computers? Let's journey back to the Middle Ages and uncover 10 surprising truths that will change how you see these castles forever. Let's start with the mastermind behind it all. The Master Mason. This wasn't just a guy with a hammer and chisel. He was the heart and soul of the entire project. A one-man genius who carried the castle's design in his head.
No blueprints, no AutoCAD.
No team of engineers with fancy degrees. Just one person, maybe a few sketches scratched into the dirt, and a lifetime of hard-earned knowledge. The Master Mason was architect, engineer, logistician, and project manager rolled into one. His authority on the construction site was absolute, almost sacred. Kings and lords might have paid for the castle, but he was the one who made it real. He didn't learn his trade in a classroom. Universities weren't for men like him. Instead, he started as a boy, hauling stones as a journeyman, apprenticed to a master who passed down secrets honed over decades. Year after year, he learned to read the landscape like a map, choosing the perfect spot for a castle, a rocky cliff for a solid foundation or a hill for a commanding view. He could calculate the load on an arch, design spiral staircases that twisted clockwise to favor defenders over right-handed attackers, and pick the right stone for every purpose, from sturdy foundations to delicate carvings. His tools were deceptively simple, rooted in practical geometry. An angle for perfect right angles, a compass for arches, and a plumb line to ensure walls stood straight. With these, he'd mark out the castle's layout on the ground, using pegs and ropes to create a life-sized plan in the dirt. For intricate elements, like the ribbed vaults of a Gothic hall or the tracery of a window, he'd retreat to his workshop, a lodge with a smooth plaster floor called a tracing floor. Kneeling there, he'd sketch full-scale templates, sometimes transferring them to thin wooden boards for the stonemasons to follow. These templates were guarded like treasures, the closest thing to a blueprint in a world without paper plans. Men like Master James of St. George, who built Edward I's chain of castles in Wales, were the rock stars of their time. Kings and dukes fought over them, offering land, houses, even fine clothes to secure their services. A master mason's salary could outstrip a knight's, and he earned every penny. He was on the site daily, overseeing every detail, from the first stone in the foundation to the final capstone on the highest tower. The pressure was crushing. One miscalculation, a wall too thin, an arch too weak, could bring a tower down along with his reputation and maybe his life. He managed hundreds, sometimes thousands, of workers, settled disputes, tracked supplies, and balanced budgets that could bankrupt a kingdom. Yet, through this blend of genius, grit, and intuition, he turned a vision into reality. These castles weren't just walls and towers. They were the physical embodiment of one man's mind, a testament to what human ingenuity could achieve with almost nothing. It's humbling to think about. isn't it? Could we match that kind of brilliance today without our machines and software? As we marvel at the master mason's role, let's dig deeper, literally, into the foundation, the unseen backbone that held these castles up. Because before a single wall could rise, a battle with the earth itself had to be won. The foundation of a castle was where the real struggle began, hidden underground in mud and darkness. You see those towering walls and think they're the star, but the truth is, a castle was only as strong as what lay beneath. Building that foundation was a grueling, dangerous process that could take years before a single stone appeared above ground. It all started with choosing the right spot. A rocky cliff was perfect, a natural fortress that could support massive walls and deter attackers. But if the castle was on flat or swampy ground, things got messy. Workers, often peasants forced into labor as part of their feudal duties, would dig a massive ditch, sometimes 15 meters deep and 30 meters wide, to surround the site. Picture thousands of men with wooden shovels tipped with iron, hacking at the earth, hauling it out in wicker baskets. They moved millions of cubic meters of dirt by hand, no bulldozers.
No excavators.
That earth wasn't wasted. It was piled into a rampart on the moat's inner edge, adding another layer of defense. If a river was nearby, they'd divert it to fill the moat, turning the castle into an island. Next came the foundation trenches, dug down to solid ground or bedrock. These could be as deep as the walls were tall, a backbreaking task that was as dangerous as it was exhausting. Trench walls collapsed, burying workers alive. Groundwater seeped in, forcing men to stand knee-deep in freezing mud, bailing it out with leather buckets. In swampy areas, they drive hundreds of oak piles into the ground, pounding them in with sheer muscle. These piles, sealed in wet, oxygen-free soil, wouldn't rot for centuries. Only then could the masonry begin. The lowest layers used the roughest, heaviest stones, ones too crude for visible walls, laid on a bed of rubble and sealed with liquid lime mortar that hardened into a rock-like monolith. This wasn't just about stability, it was about defense. Deep foundations thwarted enemies who tried to undermine walls during sieges, digging tunnels and burning wooden supports to collapse them. Every step was a gamble with lives. A misjudged soil type or a foundation too shallow could doom the castle to crack and crumble years later. The master mason treated this stage with almost religious reverence, knowing the entire project rested on it. As we stand in the mud of those trenches, let's meet the army of workers who turned these foundations into towering fortresses, a cast of characters whose lives were as complex as the castles they built. Step onto a medieval construction site, and you'd find a chaotic hive of activity, thousands of people toiling under the shadow of a half-built castle. It was a microcosm of medieval society, with its rigid hierarchies, back-breaking labor, and fleeting moments of camaraderie. At the bottom were the peasants, the muscle of the operation, dragged to the site as part of corvée, their feudal obligation. If you lived on a lord's land, you owed him days of free labor each year, and castle building was the worst job you could get. These weren't skilled workers with a passion for construction, they were farmers or shepherds, forced to leave their fields and families to dig ditches, carry stones, or haul water. Refusal meant fines, imprisonment, or worse. Picture a man, caked in mud, wielding a pickaxe, knowing a trench collapse could bury him. Or another, staggering under a stone block, his hands blistered, trudging up a slippery ramp. Some turned the great wheel of a treadwheel crane, walking endlessly inside a wooden drum like a human hamster, lifting stones to dizzying heights. It was dehumanizing, unpaid, and unglamorous. Above them were the skilled artisans, who earned wages and a sliver of respect. Quarrymen worked miles away, chiseling massive blocks from cliffs with iron wedges and hammers. One wrong strike, and a block could crush them. Stonecutters were split into rough masons, who built sturdy walls with crude stones, and freemasons, the elite who worked with soft, free stone, like limestone, carving arches, window traceries, and column capitals. Carpenters were just as vital, building scaffolding, roof trusses, and doors, their work precarious on swaying platforms. Blacksmiths kept the site running, but disease festered in the unsanitary conditions, and fights erupted over pay or pride. A priest might settle disputes or offer last rites, a grim reminder of death's constant presence. As we watch this bustling workforce, let's shift to the logistics that kept them supplied. A challenge so immense it makes modern supply chains look like child's play. Building a castle wasn't just about stacking stones. It was about getting those stones to the site in the first place. Imagine moving hundreds of thousands of tons of material, stone, wood, lime, iron, up a steep hill or across miles of muddy roads, with no trucks or trains, just oxen, carts, and sheer will. This was a logistical nightmare that would make today's engineers sweat. Stone was the main ingredient, and if you were lucky, a quarry was nearby. If not, you faced a grueling haul. Stones weighing hundreds of kilograms were loaded onto sleds or carts pulled by oxen, chosen for their strength over horses. It was agonizingly slow. A cart might carry 1 or 2 blocks, taking days to reach the site, with wheels breaking and drivers cursing the rain-soaked roads. Rivers were a lifeline. Floating stone or timber on barges was cheaper and faster, like shipping stone from France to England for the Tower of London, an international operation involving merchants and sailors. Timber was another headache, with oak beams dragged from forests or slid over frozen ground in winter. Getting materials up to the site, especially on a cliff, required wooden ramps or pulley systems powered by human or animal muscle. Lime for mortar was its own saga. Limestone was quarried, burned in massive kilns for days, and slaked with water in a dangerous, steamy process. A clerk of the works, often a literate clergyman, oversaw this chaos, tracking every cartload and coin on parchment scrolls. One broken wagon, one flooded river, one strike by angry workers could halt everything. As we marvel at this supply chain, let's climb to the scaffolding, where the real danger awaited, because building a castle wasn't just about logistics. It was about defying death at dizzying heights. If digging foundations was tough, working on the scaffolding was terrifying. Forget modern steel structures with safety harnesses. Medieval scaffolding was a death trap. Rickety wooden poles lashed with hemp ropes, swaying in the wind like a ship in a storm. Carpenters built them with pine or spruce, tied together without nails, which were too costly. The ropes stretched and frayed, needing constant checks. Scaffolds were built into the walls, with horizontal beams inserted into putlog holes to support narrow platforms, barely wide enough for 2 men.
No railings.
No safety nets, just the wall to lean against. Workers climbed wobbly ladders or shinnied-up poles, carrying tools or stones. Rain made planks slippery. Wind rocked the structure. A rotten beam could snap, sending you plummeting 20 or 30 meters to the stones below. Falls were so common they were just part of the job. Yet this was where the castle took shape. Stonemasons laid stones with precision, shouting to workers below who hauled up materials with hand-cranked winches. The noise, dust, and danger made it a battlefield, every day a test of nerve. When the castle was done, the scaffolding was dismantled, leaving putlog holes as scars of the process, still visible in some castles today. As we balance on those precarious platforms, let's look at the machines that lifted the stones. a blend of ingenuity and grueling human effort that powered this colossal endeavor. The machines that raised a castle weren't powered by steam or electricity, but by raw human muscle. The treadwheel crane was the star, a giant wooden wheel, up to 5 meters across, mounted on a rotating boom. Inside, men walked endlessly, stepping on rungs to turn the wheel, which wound a rope to lift massive stones. The physics was brilliant. The wheel size created a mechanical advantage, letting 2 men hoist weights impossible by hand. But for those inside, it was hell. They were the engine, trudging in near darkness, muscles burning, the wheel creaking. A snapped rope or broken axle could send the load crashing, killing them. Smaller devices like windlasses and capstans lifted lighter loads, still powered by men turning cranks or pushing levers. All were built on site with hemp ropes that frayed over time. A foreman coordinated the chaos with shouts and gestures, a delicate dance where one misstep could cost lives. These machines worked miracles, laying 400 cubic meters of stone a day in Wales, but behind the efficiency was the sweat of nameless workers. As we watch those cranes turn, let's focus on the mortar that held the stones together, a process as complex as alchemy. Mortar was the glue that made a castle's walls unyielding, and making it was like medieval alchemy, dangerous, precise, and critical. The recipe was simple: lime, sand, and water. But the details were everything. Sand had to be clean, washed and sifted by hand. Water had to be pure, tough in a muddy camp. Lime was the real challenge. Limestone was quarried, then burned in kilns at 900 degrees Celsius for days, tended by workers choking on acrid smoke. The resulting quicklime was slaked with water, a volatile process that could trigger steam explosions if mishandled. The slaked lime was mixed with sand in troughs, stirred into a sticky paste with wooden hose, a back-breaking task. Lime dust burned lungs and skin, but masons added secret ingredients like crushed bricks for water resistance or ox blood and egg whites for strength, creating a primitive plasticizer. This mortar bonded the outer stones, while the wall's core was filled with rubble and liquid mortar, forming a monolithic structure. The best mortars hardened into stone-like solidity, still standing today. As we admire that strength, let's meet the masons, the craftsmen whose skill and secrets shaped the castle's soul. Masons weren't just workers. They were a brotherhood, bound by skill, pride, and secrets. Freemasons, working with soft, free stone like limestone, were the elite, carving intricate arches, window traceries, and Gothic vaults. Their work demanded precision, artistry, and geometry, done in a lodge following the master mason's templates. Becoming a Freemason took years. Boys apprenticed at 12, starting with menial tasks, learning by watching. After 7 years, they became journeymen, traveling from site to site with their tools. Masons had their own rituals and symbols, like mason's marks, unique geometric signs carved into stones as signatures, quality checks, and payment records. These marks, still visible on castle walls, were the seeds of later Masonic societies. Masons faced the same dangers as others: falls, injuries, disease, but their skill earned respect and wages. Their legacy lives in every carved stone. As we trace their marks, let's face the grim reality of the construction site, where death was a daily companion. A medieval construction site was a death trap. Safety was non-existent. Workers' lives were cheap and deadlines ruled. In quarries, a hidden crack could collapse a block, crushing men. On-site, falls from shaky scaffolding were the biggest killer. One misstep and you'd plummet to your death. Falling stones or tools maimed or killed those below. There were no helmets, just luck. Sharp chisels and heavy hammers caused constant cuts and fractures, which, in the filthy camp, turned septic, leading to gangrene or tetanus. Crowded barracks bred dysentery and typhoid, with no clean water or sanitation. Medical care was brutal. A barber surgeon might amputate a limb with a hot iron, but infection often won. Records, like those from Westminster Abbey, show paltry payments to widows or maimed workers, proof of how little lives mattered. Work paused only to clear a body. As we mourn those losses, let's explore the staggering cost and time it took to build these castles. A burden that could bankrupt a kingdom. Building a castle was outrageously expensive and slow, a gamble that could ruin a lord or king. Carnarvon Castle cost Edward I £27,000, nearly England's annual budget of £30,000. Labor was the biggest expense. Peasants worked for free but needed food, while artisans demanded high wages. Materials were costly. Stone hauled from distant quarries, iron for tools, lead for roofs, glass for chapels. Kings raised taxes, took loans, or seized wealth, risking rebellion. Time was relentless. A small castle took 5 to 10 years, giants liked over 20 or 30, often spanning generations. Winter halted work, as mortar wouldn't set. A license to crenellate from the king was required, or the castle could be demolished as treason. Castles were more than fortresses. They were symbols of power, built to awe and endure. As we ponder that cost, let's reflect on the full story, a saga of sacrifice and genius that still stands today. Here we are, at the end of our journey through the brutal, awe-inspiring world of medieval castle construction. These stone giants weren't born of magic. They were forged by thousands of hands. Peasants, masons, carpenters, laborers, all pouring their strength, skill, and lives into every block. The master mason's genius guided them, turning raw stone into soaring towers. The logistics, the danger, the cost. It's a story of human endurance that humbles us. Every wall, every arch, every putlog hole is a chapter in a saga of sweat and sacrifice. These castles are monuments to an era, its technology, hierarchies, ambitions, and losses. Next time you stand before one, see the men in the treadwheels, the masons carving their marks, the workers lost to falls or disease. They're the heartbeat of these fortresses. If this dive into the past gripped you, hit that like button, subscribe to Boring History, and drop a comment. Tell us what shocked you most or what you want us to explore next. Together, we'll keep unearthing the raw, unfiltered truth of how our world was built. Don't miss what's coming. There's so much more to discover.